This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Out with the old 2018 and in with the new 2019, the look toward 2020 and you. Hi, I'm Dee Dee Sharp and welcome to this edition of The Aware Show. While we wish you a prosperous new year, it's time to look at how new laws and new trends may impact you. So coming up on this show, it's one of the most diverse groups of freshmen in Congress ever. Race, religion, sexual orientation, age, disabilities, and gender are all represented like never before in the 116th Congress. So what does that say about politics in our state and across our nation? We'll break it all down for you. And we'll update you on the new laws and amendments passed in our last election to see how they impact you as well. Plus, we'll take a look at the new tax laws, from new tax brackets, standard deductions, and what you can put towards your retirement. Some of the basic information you'll need to know before you file your taxes. That and a whole lot more still to come, so let's get started. Joining us in the studio for our first segment of the show, we have this guy, Mike Gilbert, retired Pensacola State College political science professor and much sought after public speaker and political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike.
Thank you.
You're a familiar face here on The Aware Show. Yeah. Okay, we're going to be asking you a lot of things, including some 2020 projections in just a moment. Okay. But first, let's start with what just happened.
Right.
Wow, a diverse group of Congress here we have. Absolutely.
It was an exciting period for the election and to follow it. And like you said, it's the most diverse Congress we've ever had. On the gender side of it, there are 120 new women in the Congress. There are 104 in the House of Representatives, and now in the Senate, 1/4 of the Senate is now women. 25 out of the 100 are women. The beneficiaries of this upsurge is the Democratic Party, more often than not, and it brought a lot of different groups in. Like I say, we have a lot of different ethnic and racial and backgrounds, and for the first time, a lot of it's getting younger in there, which is a good thing. Those baby boomers were declining, so, but the upshot, and particularly in gender studies, they often have, of the last 25, 30 years, talked about what impact would having more women in Congress and politics have. And there was an assumption that they would change the way things were done. And we haven't been able to do that or to really test that theory because there haven't been that many enough to study. And so far, the idea that women would be different, women up to this point, and the successful women have been more like the successful men. And Nancy Pelosi might be a good example of that. But this new group, very dynamic, they come in hard charging, they want to get things done. And so it'll be interesting to see how they function, what they're going to pursue, and whether or not. One thing I saw in one study that they were looking at difference in opinions, how women see things, and one that I thought was very interesting is that they had men and women on a survey define peace, and for men, peace is generally defined as absence of war. Women define peace as domestic tranquility, access to food and health care, all the other issues that are there. Now, it doesn't mean that, just for domestic politics is it, but they see peace in a much broader context. And so that may be a way that they would approach some of the reforms they want to carry out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not as if you've already said enough about it, but I mean, you think about blue and you think about red, but you don't think about pink, and pink has definitely
come
in here.
That's right.
And then also you've got, we could start in any area of diversity on the Congress that we just saw, with this freshman group. We could start with the Native Americans. We've got Palestinian female. I mean, we could just go on. Right. Military.
Have a Korean American.
Yeah, Korean American. I mean, it's just a wow factor with what has happened. Yeah. What does that say about our country?
Well, I think it indicates change and inclusion is definitely expanding. And I think for parties it has an implication too. For if you and I saw a comparison of the members of the Republican Party all together in a picture and the members of the Democratic Party all together. And 90% of the Senate, for instance, are white men. And you put that up next to a picture of the Democrats, and you say, who looks more like America? And definitely the inclusion of all these different groups and new groups and activities there, their interests there, they reflect what is actually America now. And I think for the Republican Party, their biggest challenge is to figure out how they can join the party in a broader sense. That the demographics of the country are changing, and the politics is going to change with it.
What happened? I mean, I know that's a kind of just a very simplistic question, and a lot of people will say, well, people went and voted. Well, no, something else was going on here that caused such a diverse group to take office. I
think there were a lot of issues that have been building up over time, over the last 10, 20 years actually. And all of it seemed to come together. And in reality, the catalyst that caused this change, that caused the outcomes, was Donald Trump. He brought to the head a lot of those problems and issues and attitudes that the diversity in the country wanted to address. They were, I don't want to say, well, in many cases they were insulted by a lot of the comments that were made. And so it's not all just about Donald Trump, but he was definitely the catalyst that caused this. He mobilized all of those various and different kinds of opinions and ideas and groups. He mobilized them into taking action and not just sitting back and let things happen the way they always do.
Okay, and you kind of alluded to this, but I'm just going to zoom in and focus a little bit more. This is going to bode well for the Democrats, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. It already is doing that. And with you mentioned 2020, with 2020 coming up, the imbalance in 2018, as far as the Senate was concerned, there were more Democratic seats that were up. In 2020, there's going to be more Republican seats. The imbalance there, a lot more than there are Democrats. And I think they're already starting to see the problems they're going to have in running for election. They're going to have to change their attitude about a lot of things too, or they become irrelevant in many cases. So 2020, I think, will be a continuation. I don't think you'll see much more change in the House. That's established. I think it's going to be there for a while. It may even go even more diverse. As a member of the group that I don't really always identify with, as an old white man, I think they're going to either have to conform or they're going to not be there much longer. It's a changing country, and for all the good reasons. Diversity doesn't mean that one group is better than the other. It just means that everybody's going to be able to participate and everybody's going to benefit from it.
And with this diversity, you'll find that each group may be pushing their own agenda.
Right.
So you're going to have a much more diverse, I should say, pool of probably not necessarily laws, but bills coming forth.
And they'll have to cooperate with each other because none of the groups will be distinct enough to carry what they want by themselves. So there's going to have to be multiple coalitions among the various groups to get certain reforms or certain acts put in, or even to change some of the ones that exist now. So that's going to be much more dynamic. It's not going to just be party versus party, I don't believe. It's going to be the various groups getting together and deciding how they're going to support each other.
I think what's interesting, going back to the girl factor and girl power, is to see that our country is no longer shy of putting women in office and high places to make decisions for us.
Right. And like I say, Nancy Pelosi, with all the effort to denigrate her and make her an evil person this last time, I think a lot of that was shown that because she was so successful. And to some people, that's a threat still. But for others, I think we celebrate the fact that here's a woman, probably and arguably the most powerful woman in American politics that we've ever had.
And we saw some of her power in recent months,
yes,
and
and today even. There's things that happened today. So, and I think even among the Democrats, the freshmen coming in, they kind of were affected by that anti-Pelosi thing, but I think once they got in there and they started talking to her and found out what she was going to do and how she was going to do it, she won over a lot of them. Now she's going to have to perform for them too, but I think they found out that she is really someone who knows what she's doing. She's very well experienced, and she knows how to push the buttons.
Will we have a female president? What's your projection?
So. Definitely. I think it might be next year in 2020.
Really?
It could be.
Mike, you're really putting yourself out there on that one.
It might even be a female of color.
Oh, really?
It could be.
You
and
like
I think I would definitely see there wouldn't be an all-white ticket again. There would be at least one of the members of the ticket, whether it's president or vice president, would be African American. And whether it's male or female, that's to be determined. I think there's several, and because of recent events, and there are several people who have kind of risen up into the attention and shown that they're very capable.
I was going to ask you, what do you think would drive that and to come to pass, that it could be a reality?
Well, I think just the fact that they were so successful in the diversity this time, and the several of those committees in Congress are going to be chaired not only by women but by women of color, and that's going to be have an impact on the policies, and you'll see that in any investigations or committee hearings that they have. It'll be a different tone, I believe, but it'll also give them ability now, because we focus so much attention to it, that it's a place where they'll be able to show their capabilities, and I think they'll get a bigger following. We've shown that the diversity can elect people, because even the ones who are African American or Indian, they didn't get in just by African American or Indian votes. So this idea that there's some kind of difference between the groups, those differences become sort of irrelevant when it comes to exercising power and ability. And I think I'm encouraged by that. You
being a person with the political background that you have in political science, what do you see in this last election that became like a trend in voting? Were there more people who turned out who were Democratic? Were there more independents? What do you think in the underlying factors and the numbers that may have impacted?
I think the independents played a big role. I think there was that dissatisfaction with the status quo, and that's what resulted in a lot of support for Donald Trump. And also in the suburbs, there's still that suburb, urban, rural dichotomy that's in play there. But I think that this time showed that, because of once Trump got into power, that some of the people, particularly in the suburbs of the big cities and also in the independents, they're swinging back. And I've always said that you get the nomination on the extremes of the party, you win the election in the middle. And we haven't had much of a middle lately. And hopefully, even though even some of the new ones are very ideologically one way or the other, we actually, the Democratic Party swung a little more to the left, the Republicans are still on the right. But that's a prescription for nothing happening. And I think this new group wants to have something happen. If we can get that extinct species that used to be called moderates to reemerge and come back in the middle and work together, that will change the way we do things too. We don't have a middle. I remember a time when there were liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats. There haven't been that way for a long time.
Long time.
Right. But it's the middle. The middle wins elections, and the middle makes politics, makes policy. And so that's what we need to see.
I'm just going to throw you a curve. When you hear "Make America Great Again" and then you see what just happened with this election, what comes to your mind?
Well, I never thought America wasn't great in the first place. But we had problems, and they needed to address those problems. But we've always had problems, and we've always been able to rise up and to deal with them. So I thought it was like most slogans, they tap into a certain idea, but everybody has it's so vague that everybody can put their own interpretation to it.
Gotcha.
And that's a lot of politics. Like family values. You never define what you mean by family values, let everybody think you mean the same thing they do.
Right.
And so,
right.
So I think that's to some extent, I think there were some people who were kind of offended by the idea that "Make America Great Again" when we didn't think we weren't great
to start with. Military. We've got more presence now in this 116th Congress, where the military is concerned. What can we expect to see for our retirees and military personnel?
Yeah, I think part of that emergence is 15 years of warfare. And one of the things I think they may be looking at is backing off a little bit on this all-professional military. You need professionals in the military, but when they're all professionals, personally, I think that's dangerous to democracy. But I think by limiting to this professional type of military, it allows more Americans not to participate and therefore not be that interested in it. And you know, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and when there was a draft, and they ended the draft after that. But to protect the country, to protect democracy, everybody has to have a stake in the game. And when you have the vast majority of Americans who could care less whether there's a war, and I talk to veterans all the time in my classes. I still teach adjunct a couple of classes, and I talk to veterans all the time, and I told them that I admire them because there's no way I could have taken 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 deployments to 2 different wars in like 3 or 4 years, to deploy and come back to normalcy and then go back again, back and forth. I'm surprised we haven't had more problems. So I think they're going to try to address, I hope they try to address that issue. And also make sure that the facilities, the programs to take care of, because there's going to be a lot more problems that come from these veterans as they come back. And I think the veterans will have a little more idea about how we should jump into these things and how we should end them before, to get into the never-ending war is not helping us any. Number one, it also drains the national treasury that way too.
So it'd be good to have these folks on board to put them into these various committees and things where they know firsthand. War is not an abstract to them. They know the reality of it, and I think that's going to shape some of their attitudes and some of the policies they'll support. Every chance we get, we like to thank our veterans and our military personnel because of what they do in serving our country, most certainly. Lastly, just want to talk about millennials. I mean, we're getting younger casting our ballots.
Talking to the group earlier, I got a little bit of a laugh on there that millennials, a graph that I showed the percentages and change from last time, and the number of millennials in Congress has gone up 420% in the last election, but that's like going from like 4 to 16 or so. But they kind of laughed at that, but it's part of its coming of age, and they're getting more involved in that too, and that's a good thing because us baby boomers were declining there. We dominated for a long time, so we have to get the new generation involved. If they want to keep this country, they need to get involved and participate in it.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll have you back real soon, Mike. We'll be looking forward to as well to some of your 2020 trends to see how all of your predictions kind of come to play. Thank you so much for being here on The Aware Show.
Unlock your newest member benefit. Over 1,000 episodes of your favorite PBS shows. American Masters, Antiques Roadshow, Nature, Nova, Masterpiece. Watch the best of PBS anytime, anywhere. Become a member, sign in, and start streaming today.
Coming up, we've talked about the new faces of Congress. Well, what about amendments and referendums that passed in the last election, and how will they impact you? For a discussion on all of this, we're joined in our studio now by our next panel of guests. David Stafford, Escambia County Supervisor of Elections, and Rodney Jones, President of the Pensacola chapter of the NAACP, also known as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen.
Absolutely.
All right, here we go. Off and running now, David. A couple of referendums and laws passed in this last election. We can't talk about all of them for the sake of time, but you can tell us some of the key ones that we can keep our eyes on.
Sure. First, some numbers. There were 14 amendments that were on ballots in Escambia County. 12 of them were constitutional amendments that were placed on there by a combination of the legislature, citizen referendum, and the Constitutional Revision Commission. Then we had 2 local referenda. We had one that barely passed. That was the school board referendum. And that what that did is it took us from an elected superintendent to an appointed superintendent. Multiple times that's been on the ballot. And in fact, the first time it only lost by a single vote. And that was back in the 1960s. So it's been on the ballot multiple times, obviously not succeeded until this last, and it was less than a point difference between it passing and not passing. And so that's going to be a huge change for us here in Escambia County because that office would have been on the ballot in the 2020 election, and now that office is not going to be on the ballot, and it'll be up to the school board to appoint the next superintendent of schools. So that's a big change, and that's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. The other local referendum that was on the ballot was a non-binding referendum that passed actually 80-20, and that basically had to do with the lease issue out on Pensacola Beach, Santa Rosa Island. That was placed on there by the Board of County Commissioners after a group of citizens came forward and said, we really want you put this referendum on the ballot. And that passed overwhelmingly. So now I think the commission and the advocates are trying to figure out what that means now that a non-binding referendum passes. I think there's folks that want more action out of the county commission. So it'll be interesting to watch as well. And then among the 12 amendments passed, all but one of them, the first one, actually, Amendment 1, was the only one that failed. And remember, now, after a change to the Constitution several years ago, these amendments need to get 60%. The statewide referenda need to be at 60% of the vote in order to become enacted. And all but one of them passed. So a couple that I think are interesting. One here, unfortunately, that's been in the news over the course of the last few days, and that's this shooting, unfortunate incident down in Sebring, Florida, where you had 5 persons that were shot and killed in a bank. They've released the names of 3 of the 5 victims, but 2 of the victims' names have been withheld, and that's due, as I understand it, and as the media is reporting, due to this, they call it Marsy's Law, and that was one of the amendments that was passed to the Florida Constitution. And then, of course, probably the one that's gotten the most significant coverage, and I think one of the biggest changes in policy here in the state of Florida is Amendment 4. And that's the Voting Restoration Amendment. And basically what that said is, and again, that came through a citizens' initiative that was placed on the ballot, and it says that persons convicted of felonies, with the exception of those convicted of murder and sexual offenses, at the completion of their sentences, to include probation and parole, their rights are restored. So they would not have to go through the traditional clemency process, which all felons had to go through prior to the enactment of Amendment 4.
Thank you so much for condensing that
Sure.
down so we all can understand it. And
Sure.
now we're going to zoom in and focus on Amendment 4, because that's why Mr. Jones is here with us here on the Aware Show. I'm going to be going back and forth between you two. Amendment 4 is going to do something for you that you haven't been able to do for yourself, hopefully. Tell us a little bit about you and about the impact that this new law could have on you.
Well, first and foremost, my name is Rodney Jones, President, NAACP, Pensacola. Also the Regional Director for the NAACP, State of Florida. And I am a returning citizen. I am a convicted felon who has hopefully got his rights restored. Now, that's what really has me excited, that Florida has finally joined the ranks of other states and welcomed their returning citizens home by restoring their rights. However, I'm a little distressed because I'm not sure about that process. Hopefully they have it laid out or going to lay it out so citizens who are returning don't have a lot of hurdles to jump. So in one sense, I'm very, very excited. In another sense, I'm just kind of a little distressed in regards to what is going to happen or what is the process.
Mm-hmm. Tell us if, I don't want to dig too far and pry too much into your personal information, but I would like to share with our viewers what you were convicted of and what your process has been now in trying to get your rights restored to vote.
Well, I was young, like many of us were, and the only difference between me and them is I got caught. I was convicted of possession of cocaine, possession with intent to distribute cocaine, sales, delivery, manufacturing of cocaine, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, possession with intent to distribute, and aggravated with a firearm. So those are some of the I would say upper crimes or larger crimes or major crimes that an individual can commit. I've pursued getting my rights stored back before, which was a very, very tedious process. I contacted parole board, I filed the necessary paperwork. However, in that process, there are multiple hurdles that an individual has to jump. And if they say something is out of place, now you have to go through the process of trying to prove to them how that's not out of place and that you are correct in your assumptions and what you're doing to try to get those rights restored.
I can only imagine it's got to be difficult. You've served 7.5 years in prison, and you've gotten out and you've done everything that, you know, according to your story, that you were supposed to do, and you've had this uphill battle now, and then Amendment 4 comes now.
Yes.
So this is a time for you to just kind of be celebrating something that you've been fighting to have restored now. For how long? How long have you been fighting this fight?
I've been fighting this fight. I've been out of prison for 18 years now. And I've been fighting this fight for quite some time. Yes, ma'am.
David, this is not really new. I mean, your case, of course, is just like, wow. Thank you for being on the Aware Show and sharing all that information with us. But this has been kind of like what's been going on for over, what, 1.4 million people?
Yeah, yes. 1.4 was the number that I've seen most recently. No, so you know, our involvement in this process is this. When an individual registers to vote, there's a box. There's several boxes they have to check. One that says they're a U.S. citizen. The other it says, there's two. One that says that they've not been declared mentally incapacitated, or if they have, that they've had those rights restored. The other one says I've not been convicted of a felony, or if I have, my rights have been restored. So as long as those boxes are checked, we process those. So from our standpoint, the process isn't any different. What happens then on the back end is all of those registrations go through a verification process at the state. And what would happen is they would be run against a database of known felons, and then if a person showed up on that list, then they would do some investigation to make sure that, you know, it was a match. They would then check with the clemency to see if that person had been granted clemency, and if not, they would send those files down to the local supervisors of elections, and then we would verify all the information, then go through what's called the notice and removal process. What's different now is individuals do not have to go through the formal clemency process pursuant to this now amendment to the Constitution. And as we were discussing earlier, there are some procedural issues I think that have arisen. There was a good hearing that took place earlier this week over in Tallahassee, where all of the parties, everybody from my colleague in Okaloosa County was there, who happens to be the president of our association, Paul Lux. You had individuals from FDLE, from the Florida Commission on Offender Review, and folks from the Division of Elections, and all the parties, including the policymakers there, to say, okay, what are the issues that we need to have addressed? And I think almost to a person, everybody felt like it was a worthwhile endeavor, and everybody seemed to be recognizing the issues, some of the questions that need to be answered. And it seemed like there was a good consensus that it can be done, and hopefully relatively soon, so we can lay the process out for individuals so they can know, and they'll have assurance that they have met whatever requirements that they need to have met to be able to check the box, if you will, submit their Florida voter registration application. And then we certainly are looking forward to welcoming all these new voters into the process in the 2020 election cycle.
Very good. You have anything you want to add to that?
No, just just like you were saying, I'm very excited, and I did catch that hearing, and just hoping that this process really get worked out relatively fast, because I know there was a process prior to Amendment 4, and the process was very tedious and very slow.
Tell us about it. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I had to contact the parole board, the parole commission. I had to first apply, and then the parole board has to contact you back and say, okay, you're clear based on the fact that you finished your sentence, And what that means is you have sent to them all of your dispositions. And dispositions are simply what happened in your court proceedings. Did you get sentenced? Did you get probation? Did you complete all that? And once you pick up your dispositions, you send them all in. Then they'll make a decision whether or not this disposition is accurate and true, even though you're sending it from the clerk of court here in Escambia County. In my case, they have to make sure that everything about this is accurate. However, in my case, pursuing this ability to be able to get back in the voting pool at that particular time, they told me I owed fines or fees or restitution or something to that effect. However, at the time, I had been out of prison over 10 years, and all of my files had been sent to the archives. So I have to go to the archives, pull all my records from the archives, then found out I didn't owe a thing. Now I had to try to prove to them that I actually didn't owe Escambia County any restitution, court costs, or fines or fees.
Because if you had, wouldn't that have meant you went back to
Absolutely. If I had owed, prison. That meant I had violated,
right? And
they would have automatically charged me with a crime. Stands to reason if I hadn't been charged with a crime, obviously I took care of everything that was associated with my court proceedings. However, they still denied me my rights.
Wow. So now this, David, I think it's safe to say that with this now, some of that may be at least eliminated, and then we still have to look at this is still a case by case.
I think the idea that the universe of people that are going to have to go through that process is going to be, I would probably say, reduced by 90%. Because if you look at convicted felons, and then among those, how many are convicted of murder or sexual offenses, it's a very small percentage of overall felony convictions. So that process that Rodney was describing in the future should be reserved just for that subset of felons. The rest of particularly someone like in your case, who went through the sentencing, did their time, fulfilled all their obligations, they would then automatically have those rights restored upon completion. And I think, again, just administratively, everybody's trying to get their hands around how exactly that process from the governmental side is going to work. And like I said, I'm hopeful that it's something that can be, all the players seem to be at the same place saying, yeah, this is something we need to figure out, but let's get it figured out and let's get it done quickly.
I guess first things first, too, is just to get the law there first.
Right.
And now this opens the door to go ahead and put the infrastructure in place to make sure that this runs smoothly.
We're in a significantly different place than we were 3 or 4 months ago, where the process was, there was also, which we didn't mention, there was a time frame. We had to actually wait. You had to wait 5 or 7 years, depending on the before you could even apply.
Wow.
And then once you did apply, the process took a lot of time. And if you look at the numbers of people that actually made it through the process versus the folks that were in the process, it's a very, very small fraction.
Because from what he just described, David, from what Rodney just described, it was like you would have been deterred from pursuing this after some of the processes that you just explained to us.
Absolutely.
A long time ago, you would have quit.
Many people find themselves in that position. They just get tired of applying. They get tired of jumping through the hurdles after being out for 10 years. I just assumed naturally that I would have no problems. I completed everything that I needed completed associated with my judicial proceedings. However, when I applied 10 years later, after I'm released from prison incarceration, they still wouldn't restore my rights. I'll say, that's a problem. Yeah.
So after 18 years, is it?
Yes, ma'am.
You could possibly be voting
I am hopeful.
Next year, 2020.
I am hopeful. Yes, ma'am. I am.
What's that going to be like for you?
Very, very exciting because I'm used to going around encouraging people to get out and vote.
Yeah, because you're
participate.
You're such a major force in getting folks registered to vote.
Yes, and it'll just be an awesome thing just to be able to actually participate. And I think that I'm just echoing the feelings of many other individuals who return to free world society and want to participate in, who actually want to participate in this process.
Which leads me, David, to the thought process of complacency. Here you have someone who's paid his debt to society, who's fighting to vote,
Right.
and then you have other folks who have the right to vote, just have it and don't vote.
We had 38% of registered voters in the last election, and there was a much higher turnout than we normally see in a midterm election. 38% of the people who were eligible to go walk into a polling place or go to an early voting location or get their ballot in the mail chose not to vote. So it is a huge contrast when you see folks out there, that are really fighting to get their rights restored. Then you have folks out there that have the right, which they absolutely have the right to not participate. And there's a number of different reasons people don't participate in elections. But what I see, part of my job and what I do, I like to go into schools pretty often. And the contrast is pretty significant because if you look at turnout, and it's not unique to Escambia County or Florida, it's across the country. When you look at turnout, the younger you are, the less likely it is that you're going to turn out to vote. The older you are, the more likely it is that you're going to turn out. It's actually a straight line that goes up like this in each age group. And so I go in and tell the students, I said, hey, if you and your grandparents sit around and you agree on everything politically, then by all means,
keep letting them vote.
Yeah, let them, because they're going to go vote.
Yes.
That's right.
And if you're not there to make sure your voice is heard, they're going to dominate. And again, I'm getting closer to that.
Yeah, because you can better bet I'm going to be voting in favor of anything that has to do with retirement, Social Security, and you're going to have to pay for it. I'm just kidding.
But we did see we saw some elevated level of participation in this last election cycle. I think some of the number crunchers are still looking at that, but the initial results are that participation among younger voters has increased. So, but everybody again don't, and also not just for people currently that are fighting for that, right? But the people that have come before, the people that fought the battles, literally, bled and died for the right for people to have the opportunity to go out and make their voice heard and participate in those and elect those who govern them. And so I always try to bring that home to particularly to students who they didn't live through the civil rights era. I didn't live through the civil rights era, but being in this position, you certainly have a profound respect for those that came before and fought the good fight so that we can be where we are today.
Right. And speaking of the good fight, I'll give you an opportunity to sort of wrap things up with some closing comments. You are certainly an example of someone who's just turned this whole thing around. President of the NAACP, moving forward. Just an encouraging thing to see you just show that we can be productive.
That's right.
From things that have happened negatively in our past.
Absolutely.
That going forward, we can do this. You're that person.
Absolutely.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel great, and I enjoy encouraging people and giving them and telling them that there are many opportunities out there. Even if you are a convicted felon, even if you can't vote, you can start paving the way for other people who are coming behind you. And that's what I did. I decided to get in the process. Although I couldn't vote, I was able to help, I was able to register people, I was able to educate people on voting process, particular amendments, and particular people who are running for specific offices. I was able to get in that process. And so I encourage people, even today, to say, hey, it's not over because you have a felon. It's not over because you did something wrong in your past. We've all done something in our past. We all have some type of skeletons in our closet. But I say, get out, get in the process. Get acclimated to what's going on within your community so that you can be a help, you can be a hand up and not a push down.
I would just love to end there. That is really great. Bravo, my brother. But I want to give you a chance to have a closing comment, if any, David.
Well, just we're there, and we're working through the process of making sure that those returning citizens do have the opportunity to re-engage in the process. We want to make that and just recognizing there are some questions, but we do want everybody to come in and submit those Florida voter registration applications, and I'm very hopeful that these, again, questions can be resolved here in short order, and then we can have a great turnout for the 2020 election cycle, which is just around the corner.
Just around the corner. Thank you so much. It's awesome to have someone like you in the position where you're in, to have a heart and the mind and the ability to do what you're doing for us. Appreciate you for being here on the Aware Show and all that you do. Make sure our votes count. Sir, keep fighting. Keep fighting. All right. Thank you, David and Rodney, for being here on the Aware Show.
There are over 42,000 children under the age of 5 in Northwest Florida. Many of these children will never have the opportunity to go to preschool. Thanks to quality educational television programs and WSRE's Imagination Station, these kids are developing critical early learning skills. Any decrease in funding will impact our ability to deliver PBS Kids programs like Wild Kratts, Daniel Tiger, and the Odd Squad. These programs introduce children to science and nature, teach them about the world, and show them that learning can be fun. Most importantly, they connect with children and share a message about caring, friendship, and individuality. In the immortal words of Mr. Rogers, there is no person in the whole wide world like you, and I like you just the way you are. There's no other place in the whole wide world like PBS Kids. If you like us just the way we are, please call in with your donation today and say to all, I love WSRE. Thank you.
And our last set of guests are here to tell us more about the new tax law reforms and changes, things you'll want to know before you file your taxes. So joining me in our studio to talk taxes, we have Katrina Madden, Financial Stability Outreach Manager with VITA, short for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, a program administered by the United Way of Escambia County. And we also have Laura Gilliam, the President and CEO of United Way of Escambia County. Thank you both ladies for joining us here on The Aware Show.
Thank you.
We're going to just dive right in. Laura, please tell us a little bit more about VITA.
VITA, as you said, is the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. It is actually an IRS program, and we administer it in Escambia County. Volunteers who are trained through an IRS program provide free tax preparation to individuals who qualify by meeting a financial threshold. So $66,000 or less, they qualify to have their taxes done for free. It's a great program that gets money into the pockets of these hardworking families, and also is kind of an economic driver for the county because it brings those dollars into the community that might not come in otherwise.
I like that. So it works for individual families and it works for our community.
Exactly.
Very good. Tell us a little bit more. We're going to be going back and forth here about how VITA plays into our tax reform laws that we can expect when we file our taxes this year, but I also want to get to a lot of that because there's a lot coming down the pipe that we're not expecting, but we're going to get some wake-up calls.
Yes.
Tell us.
Yes.
More.
Well, where to start with this?
I'll help you get started. Let's just talk about standard tax deductions.
Yes.
We can talk about a lot of things that parents with kids are going to be kind of in for some changes this year. So you're right. There are a lot of places to start. There are a lot of new tax reform things that we need to know about.
Absolutely.
You start where you think will make the most impact, so we make sure we get that in on The Aware Show.
Okay. So the first thing that we're going to see is that our standard deductions. So we're going to see that they've actually have doubled. So for example, for an individual, they're going to see their tax standard deduction increase from $6,350 up to $12,000. For somebody filing head of household, that would be a single person with dependents, they're going to see that increase up to $18,000. And for married filing joint, they're going to see that increase to $24,000. But with that, we need to realize that they have taken away exemptions. So who this is going to impact the most is people with large families. So for instance, if last year you have a family of, let's see, 6. So you have 4 children, they're all under the age of 17. You get an exemption which is $4,000 for each child. So that's over a $16,000 exemption plus your standard deduction. So they're going to see that change this year. So you're thinking that you're going to get this big tax return because you have $24,000, but you're not going to because you don't have that exemption anymore.
You know, we were talking about some of this in the green room, and I know why you're sitting here, you're going, I don't know where to start, because you don't know where to start with the good news or the bad news, because there's a lot of bad news. And so, you know, in one hand you're going to get, and on another hand you're going to give a whole lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tell us more. So let's look at it like that. I mean, I hate to say it. Let's look at the bad news, and then we'll try to come back to some of the good news. With filing our taxes.
Okay.
Tax brackets.
Tax
brackets.
Start there.
There.
Okay. So with the tax brackets, what you're going to look at, you're going to see that the tax brackets have dropped. So last year, the tax bracket was $0 to $9,052. So if you made below that, your tax bracket was 10%. But then if you made over that, the new tax bracket this year is $9,525. So it's a little bit of increase. So that means that if you were on that margin of that, say, you know, you made $10,000, or excuse me, if you made this year $9,400, you're going to be dropped back into that lower tax bracket. So it's going to be good for those who are in the lower income. So, and first of all, let's explain what a tax bracket is.
Okay, very good.
Okay, let's go there. So for what tax bracket is the amount of taxes that you're going to pay on your taxable income. So like I said, that $0 to $952, you're only going to pay 10% taxes. But then from there, from the $9,526. And then from there, if you make over that, your tax bracket goes to the 12%. That doesn't mean that you're going to pay 12% across the board. So the first $9,526 is going to be at 10%. So you're going to pay $952 on that first $9,500 of your income, and then after that you go into the 12% tax bracket, and it goes up like that. So we have a progressive tax system. So what I would suggest people do is actually go look at the tax bracket chart to see where you fall in. So if you feel like you're paying too much taxes, what you'll need to do, I always tell people, start contributing to your retirement fund. That lowers your taxable income, because that's something positive that we can do to control how much we're paying in our taxes. So that gives us a little bit of control, and we just need to learn how to start doing that, especially when you get further up in income. That's a good thing to do, is just start contributing to your IRA 401k, and that will get you back into the lower tax bracket.
It's just hard to think about, and you can jump in here, Laura, at any time. Hard to think about retirement funds when you're just trying to make it, you know, ends meet and get to the end of the year and to the new year, and then get that refund check to do something, and then we have all these changes that are coming out. Even right now, we're talking about changes, personal exemptions.
Yes.
That was always a way to recoup some kind of way.
It is. So that's where the education comes in.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing about coming to a VITA tax preparer, is we can educate you on how to prepare for that. We can teach you how to save, send you to a budgeting class, so that way you can be prepared for the next year. And then we can even talk to you about contributing to a retirement fund and opening that up. And I agree, I'm very bad about that. I always think about that when tax time comes, and I'm like, oh. So it's something that we need to start thinking about now for the next year.
Yeah, and that's what I like, Laura. You all actually want people to emphasize being educated and being empowered when it comes to filing your taxes through programs like VITA.
Exactly. You know, this is, like we said, this is free tax preparation. It's getting money into the pockets of these individuals, but it's also educating them about what they can do with that refund. Something productive to do, pay down debt, save for an education or for a vehicle that'll get them to work. You know, there are many, many options, but that's VITA is just kind of the start and the entry for a lot of these folks, for us to be able to connect them with resources that can help them, or to do to better educate them and work on some of that financial literacy as well. The other thing that I appreciate so much about VITA is that these, as I mentioned earlier, these volunteers are trained. And so when a person comes in to have their taxes done at a VITA site, they're going to be working with a volunteer who is going to be looking for those credits. So while, you know, some of this might sound kind of dismal, the advantage of going to a VITA site is that they know to look for the earned income tax credit. They know to look for the child tax credit. So they're going to ask you these questions, and they're going to really look to see how they can get the most back in refunds for those clients that are coming in the door.
Absolutely. That's good. That's good. Some more things we could expect to see that are different on in filing our taxes this year. Well, what do we need to know?
Positive, on the positive note.
Okay, good. We've got some positive.
So the child tax credit has increased from $1,400 to $2,000 this year. So you're going to see a little bit of an increase in that. And now, if you have a child that's above the age of 17 and they're college age students up to the age of 26, you can get that additional dependent it's called a dependent care credit or an additional child tax credit, and that can be up to $500 on your tax return. So that's a plus. Whereas before, once your child hit that certain threshold, you couldn't get any credit for them. You couldn't claim them. So that's a positive this year. The increase in charitable contributions this year. So last year is capped at 50% of your adjusted gross income. This year is up to 60% of your adjusted gross income. So that's going to help people who are making that, who are the higher income person, and they want to lower that their taxable income. They can start doing more contributions, and that will lower what they pay in their taxes. So that's a positive.
Give more, get more.
Exactly.
Give to United. Wait, no, just kidding. Keep VITA going.
I like that.
I'm just saying. You all do a lot of great things in the community, so that's always a good thing. Yes, absolutely. There's going to be a little bit of difference this year in your individual tax exemptions. To my understanding, you're not going to be able to do your individual exemptions the way we've done before.
Yes, there will be some changes because your standard deduction has increased.
Right.
If you want to itemize, your deductions have to be greater than your standard deduction. So for instance, if you itemized last year and you were a single person, your standard deductions were your standard deduction was $6,350. And if you had $8,000 in deductions, you can itemize. Well, this year, if your deductions are they have to be less than the $12,000 that you're getting. So that's going to be a little bit more difficult. So there's also some things, there's a positive there. If you are able to itemize and you get over that $12,000 of deductions, the positive thing is medical. That's actually dropped down. It was 10% of your adjusted gross income. Now it's 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. So you get a little bit of buffer there. If you want to claim your mortgage and your interest statement, there is some caps to that this year. So you have to look at it on an individual basis. There's so many rabbit holes we can go down with this and so many laws that we can go down with it. So the one thing is before you were able to claim if you took out a loan, your home equity interest, you can't claim that this year. So it just has to be like on a primary residence. So you can't go into debt and claim that as a deduction. So there's a little bit of changes.
I can see a lot of things. Number one, you can get real hairy real quick, like you said, and go down these rabbit holes real quick with this. But that, to me, just enforces why if you need assistance, then you do have programs like VITA out there to help you.
Exactly. There's some things that people, if they think they know it, but if you come into a VITA location, like Laura said, they're trying to look for certain tax credits, certain exemptions, certain deductions that they can take. That's sometimes the average individual, they don't think about this. So that's why you need to come to somebody who is trained
IRS
in this.
trained.
Yes, and we have the backing of the IRS. We're 100% IRS supported. So if there's anything that's difficult that we don't know, we're not going to pretend like we know everything because there's so many loopholes and laws that you just have to know. We work with an IRS agent that has been with the system for working with the IRS for 30 years, and she is the guru of all these tax laws.
So that benefits people.
It does benefit us. So we're able to pick up the phone at any point and call her if there's something that comes up that we don't know or a difficult situation. So that is a great plus.
Very good. I want to talk about the fact that, Laura, you all don't like people to actually go out there and try to do the rapid refund because of the actual penalties that are compounded with that. Tell us a little bit, educate our viewers about that, because so often we're wanting to get our hands on the money,
right.
but there are drawbacks.
Right.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, and I think, the term rapid refund implies that it just means that you're going to get all of your money that you're owed in your refund back quickly. And you can get it quickly, but it's actually a loan. So it's actually a loan on your refund. So you're not going to end up getting all of it back because you're going to have to pay it back in interest. So, when you come to a VITA site, not only are you not paying, so you're saving between $400 and $600 to have your taxes done, but we will deposit, if you have a bank account, we can do a direct deposit into your account, the full amount of the refund, and that deposit, if you have direct deposit, you get it faster. If not, then you'll get a check, and it's anywhere from 7 to 10 days. So it doesn't take a long time, and it's just, you're going to get all your money, and you don't with rapid refund. So I think a lot of that is just people don't understand what that is, and so that's another thing that we try to do even throughout the year, is to educate people about, you know, what their options are and what is happening if they choose to go that route.
It's worth the wait.
Yes, it is.
It's just a few days.
Yeah, and
to
it's
get your
not that
money
long a
without
wait.
penalty.
That's the whole point, is it's not that long.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants additional information for VITA and that sort of thing, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to call our information and referral line, our 211 line, and they can get all the information. We can set them an appointment, or we can tell them set an appointment, tell them where the locations are. We have 8 locations this year throughout Escambia County, and we're not just serving just Escambia County residents, we're serving our surrounding counties as well. So call 211, get an appointment, and then come in and see us, and we'll get you taken care of.
That's good. And I just wanted to give our viewers an opportunity to just hear a little bit more. I mean, I know that you're not here in the official United Way capacity, but I do want to give you a chance to just talk a little bit about United Way and all the wonderful things that you all do.
Thanks. Well, this fits in, VITA fits in so well with our goals and what we're trying to do in the community, because United Way of Escambia County fights for the health, education, and financial stability of every person in Escambia County. And so we are really targeting through investment of dollars into programs, through partnerships like VITA, and through other collaborative efforts to address these issues that are in these areas of health, education, and financial stability. We really now are trying to identify root causes. So, you know, we know that you can do a quick fix, but what we want to know is, why is something happening? Why are these issues in the community? And then create long-term solutions. So Band-Aid fixes, that'll get you through the short term, but what we want to do is to work with organizations in the community, with partners in the community, to create these long-term solutions so that these problems don't keep cropping up. And financial stability is one way to get that foundation laid so that people can become more secure, more self-sufficient. So again, it fits right in with our mission and our goals.
Good. We appreciate everything you all do with United Way. Just 30 seconds, just want to give you an opportunity you've given us a way to contact you for more information on VITA and that sort of thing. Lastly, a last note about filing your taxes this year that you want folks to keep in mind, because we've talked about standard deductions, tax brackets, child tax credit updates, and also retirement fund and the importance of that. Any other additional information you want to share with our viewers before we go?
Yes, the last thing I want to share is that a lot of people don't file their taxes because they don't feel like they're getting something back. And our main message is, a lot of people are due earned income tax credit, and they're leaving on the table. So we're telling them to go file your taxes and get the money back so you can use it to become more financially stable. It's all about education.
Sounds good to me. Education, empowerment,
yes.
VITA program through United Way. Thank
yes.
you, ladies. That's all the time we have for now. For more information on these agencies, you can contact them by the information listed right there on your screen. On this Aware Show, we've introduced you to the new 116th Congress, the most diverse Congress ever, and it's deemed a superlative group of members to represent our nation and our state. We'll see what 2020 brings. Plus, hopefully you are now ready to file your taxes and you're aware of the new tax laws, amendments, and referendums that may impact you. Until next time, I'm Dee Dee Sharp saying be sure to catch us on YouTube or here at WSRE.org. Until then, stay informed and stay aware.